Just as thoughts are the language of the brain, feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel create a state of being. A state of being is when your mind and body are working together. So, your present state of being is your genuine mind-body connection. Every time you have a thought, in addition to making neurotransmitters, your brain also makes another chemical, a small protein called a neuropeptide that sends a message to your body. Your body then reacts by having a feeling. The brain notices that the body is having a feeling, so the brain generates another thought matched exactly to that feeling that will produce more of the same chemical messages that allow you to think the way you were just feeling. So thinking creates feeling, and then feeling creates thinking that's equal to those feelings. It's a loop, one that, for most people, can go on 87 for years. And because the brain acts on the body's feelings by generating the same thoughts that will produce the same emotions, it becomes clear that redundant thoughts hardwire your brain into a fixed pattern of neurocircuitry. But what happens in the body? Because feelings are the modus operandi of the body, the emotions you continually feel based on your automatic thinking will condition the body to memorize those emotions that are equal to the unconscious hardwired mind and brain. That means that the conscious mind isn't really in charge. The body has subconsciously been programmed and conditioned, in a very real way, to become its own mind. Eventually, when this loop of thinking and feeling and then feeling and thinking has been operating long enough, our bodies memorize the emotions that our brains have signaled our bodies to feel. The cycle becomes so established and ingrained that it creates a familiar state of being, one based on old information that keeps recycling those emotions, which are nothing more than the chemical records of past experiences, driving our thoughts and are being played out over and over again. As long as this continues, we're living in the past. No wonder it's so hard for us to change our future. If the neurons are firing the same way, they're triggering the release of the same chemical neurotransmitters and neuropeptides in the brain and body, and then these same chemicals begin to train the body to further remember those emotions by altering it physically once again. The cells and tissues receive these very specific chemical signals at specific receptor sites. Receptor sites are akin to docking stations for chemical messengers. The messengers fit perfectly in place, like a child's puzzle in which certain shapes, like a circle, a triangle, or a square, fit into specific openings. Think of those chemical messengers, which are really molecules of emotion, as carrying barcodes that enable the cell receptors to read the messenger's electromagnetic energy. When the exact match is made, the receptor site prepares itself. The messenger docks, the cell receives the chemical messages, and then the cell creates or alters a protein. The new protein activates the cell's DNA within the nucleus. The DNA opens up and unwinds, the gene is read for that corresponding message from outside the cell, and the cell makes a new protein from its DNA, for example, a particular hormone, and releases it into the body. Now the body is being trained by the mind. If this process continues for years and years, because the same signals outside of the cell are coming from the same level of mind in the brain, because the person is thinking, acting, and feeling the same every day, then it makes sense that the same genes will be activated in the same ways, because the body is receiving the same data from the environment. There are no new thoughts ignited, no new choices made, no new behaviors demonstrated, no new experiences embraced, and no new feelings created. When the same genes are repeatedly activated by the same information from the brain, then the genes keep getting selected over and over again, and just like gears in a car, they start to wear out. The body makes proteins with weaker structures and lesser functions. We get sick and we age. In time, one of two scenarios can occur. The intelligence of the cell membrane, which is consistently receiving the same information, can adapt to the body's needs and demands by modifying its receptor site so that it can accommodate more of those chemicals. Basically, it creates more docking stations to satisfy the demand, just as supermarkets open up additional checkout lanes when the lines get too long. If business stays Good, if those same chemicals keep coming, then you'll have to hire more employees and keep more lanes open. Now the body is equal to and has become the mind. In the other scenario, the cell becomes too overwhelmed with the continual bombardment of feelings and emotions on a moment-to-moment basis to allow all the chemical messengers to dock. Because the same chemicals are more or less hanging around outside the cells. Docking station doors day in and day out, the cell gets used to those chemicals being there. So only when the brain produces a lot more heightened emotions does the cell become willing to open its doors. Once you increase the intensity of the emotion, the cell is stimulated enough so that the docking station doors open and the cell turns on. You'll hear more about the importance of emotion later. This is a key part of the placebo equation. In the first scenario, when the cell makes new receptor sites, the body will crave those specific chemicals when the brain doesn't make enough. And consequently, our feelings will determine our thinking, our bodies will control our minds. That's what I mean when I say the body memorizes the emotion. It has become biologically conditioned and altered to be a reflection of the mind. In the second scenario, once the cell is overwhelmed by the bombardment and the receptors become desensitized, then just as a drug addict does, the body will require a greater chemical thrill to turn on the cell. In other words, in order for the body to become stimulated and get its fix, you'll need to get angrier, more worried, guiltier, or more confused than last time. So you might feel the need to start a bit of drama by yelling at your dog for no reason, just to give the body its drug of choice. Or maybe you can't help talking about how much you despise your mother-in-law just so the body has even more chemicals available with enough strength to arouse the cell. Or you start obsessing about some horrible imagined outcome just so the body can get a rush of adrenal hormones. When the body isn't getting its emotional chemical needs met, it will signal the brain to make more of those chemicals. The body is controlling the mind. That sounds very much like an addiction. So now, when I use the term emotional addiction, you'll understand what I mean. When feelings have become the means of thinking in this manner, or we can't think greater than how we feel, then we're in the program. Our thinking is how we feel, and our feelings are how we think. What we experience is like a merger of thoughts and feelings, we're thinking or feeling. Since we're caught in this loop, then our bodies, as the unconscious mind, actually believe they are living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our minds and bodies are one, aligned to a destiny predetermined by our unconscious programs. So to change requires being greater than the body and all its emotional memories, addictions, and unconscious habituations, that is, to no longer be defined by the body as the mind. The repetition of the cycle of thinking and feeling and then feeling and thinking is the conditioning process of the body that the conscious mind delivers. Once the body becomes the mind, that's called a habit. A habit is when your body is the mind. 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, skills, emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, and attitudes that functions like a subconscious automatic computer program. So 95% of who you are is a subconscious or even an unconscious state of being. And that means your conscious mind's 5% is working against the 95% of what you've memorized subconsciously. You can think positively all you want, but that 5% of your mind that's conscious will feel as if it's swimming upstream against the current of the other 95% of your mind, your unconscious body chemistry that has been remembering and memorizing whatever negativity you've been harboring for the past 35 years. That's mind and body working in opposition. No wonder you don't get very far when you try to fight that current. That's why I called my last book Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Because that's the greatest habit we have to break, thinking, feeling, and behaving in the same way that reinforces the unconscious programs that reflect our personalities and our personal realities. We can't create a new future while we're living in our past. It's simply impossible. Here's an example that will pull all of this together. I'm intentionally choosing a negative event, because these types of events tend to keep us limited, whereas more successful, empowering, and uplifting events usually help us create a better future. That process will become clear soon. So let's say that you had a horrific past experience with public speaking that scarred you emotionally. Feel free to substitute any emotionally scarring experience of your choice here. Because of that experience, you now fear standing up to talk in front of a group of people. It makes you feel insecure, anxious, and anything but confident. Just thinking about looking out over a meeting room of even 20 people causes your throat to close up, your hands to go cold and clammy, your heart to race, your face and neck to flush, your stomach to twist, and your brain to freeze. All of these reactions come under the jurisdiction of your autonomic nervous system, the nervous system that functions subconsciously, below your conscious control. Think of autonomic as automatic. It's the part of the nervous system that regulates digestion, hormones, circulation, body temperature, and so on without your having any conscious control over them. You can't decide to change your heart rate, alter blood flow to your extremities to cool them off, heat up your face and neck, change the metabolic secretions of your digestive enzymes, or shut off millions of nerve cells from firing on command. Try as you might to consciously change any one of these functions, you'll probably find that you won't be able to do it. So when your body makes these autonomic physiological changes, it's because you have associated the future thought of standing in front of an audience delivering a presentation with the past emotional memory of your flawed public speaking experience. And when that future thought, idea, or possibility is consistently associated with the past feelings of anxiety, failure, or embarrassment, in time the mind will condition the body to respond automatically to that feeling. This is how we continuously move into familiar states of being. Our thoughts and feelings become one with the past because we can't think greater than how we feel. Now let's take a closer look at how that works inside your brain. The particular event that was embossed and patterned neurologically as a past memory, remember, experience enriches brain circuitry, becomes physically wired in your brain just like a footprint. As a consequence, you can retrace your steps and recall the negative public speaking experience